We're live now, Nandita.
Good, Sharda.
Lovely to see you
See,
after years.
we haven't met in so long, and
Yeah,
now we can see each other. We wouldn't have thought of
actually,
this. Another few years would have gone past.
absolutely. So here we are, and I'm sort of very nostalgic about our days in Delhi when we used to hang out
Yes.
and formative
Good
years of
days.
being social and political and cultural, and then you just zoomed
Absolutely.
off to a whole other zone. So welcome, viewers. We are live with the one and only Nandita Das, one of my favorite
Thank you.
people in the whole world, one of my favorite actors in the whole world, one of my favorite activists in the whole world. Nandita, I want to thank you for something specially because I've done a little more than half a dozen conversations, and all of them turned out to be with men. So I was beginning to hear these murmurs. Why aren't
See,
you
that
talking
means
to enough
you
people?
haven't been looking hard enough.
There you go. But needless to say, I've been chasing Nandita for the longest time in this conversation. I've pinned her down this evening. So, viewers, here we are, and you can ask your questions live. We will streamline them and take as many as possible. But to start, kick it off, Nandita, what is this lockdown doing to you? I mean, I know that you did come out with a video, listen to her. I saw it. It's wonderful and it's very intense, and this whole, I mean, the various
As the
things that
times are.
lockdown is doing to people, including domestic violence. So, but what
Hmm.
has it been like for you personally and also in the public domain?
I think like all of us, we didn't realize what was coming and we kept sort of thinking, is there too much hype? Is it a passing thing? How long will it take? We thought, okay, maybe 2 months. We started thinking maybe it's good for us to be at home. Oh, I'm going to clean up my cupboards. Different chatter was on in the beginning. And then we also saw what it actually did to so many other people, like, for instance, the migrant workers, the daily wagers, what was happening to the health workers who were in the frontliners. So there was also this, I think, a sense of guilt almost that we didn't realize that just to be locked down at home could in itself be such a luxury, and that it's such a privilege to even, this whole thing of stay home, stay safe, that so many people are not home and they are not safe. So I think there was a lot of this mixed feeling, and I'm quite used to being at home. So for me personally, there wasn't a huge change. I work from home. If I'm not doing anything specific, like for an event or a talk or a film, I'm very much at home. So for me personally, nothing happened, and also luckily I have live-in help. So I wasn't cooking and cleaning and all of that many people were grappling with. So I totally felt like, God, I don't know, why am I so lucky? Like, it almost felt. The only difference was that my son, he's going to be 10 tomorrow, in fact, is was at home, and
Happy
that was
birthday,
kind of
Vihan.
new.
Yeah.
Ihan, happy birthday! I'm trying to put him to bed, so trying to make sure that he's sleeping after he reads his book. So he was 24 hours at home, which initially was good, but then it started taking a toll because I couldn't really work. And like most women, was multitasking, juggling, was always distracted. I started getting many requests for these webinars and conversations. And in the beginning, because I was feeling so helpless, I was also doing many because I felt at least that is some way to engage. That is also a way to hear what is happening from other panelists. Or sometimes, it was a summit of some sort, like all these various conversations that were happening. It felt like it was keeping me alive at some level, that I was at least able to share my thoughts and think about it. Because when you talk, you're also talking to yourself. You're also kind of thinking aloud, and it helped me to process that whole experience. Of course, I also kind of felt zoomed out after a couple of months. It became rather fatiguing. And that's why I wasn't trying to be hard to get, but I was just so exhausted when you first reached out, and I said, okay, I'm just going to take a break. And it was really not too much of a break. And then also many of my friends are working on issues of domestic violence. There were articles not just in India but world over being written about the surge in cases of domestic violence, how helplines were all jammed with so many calls, overburdening of work. I mean, women across class were talking about how they are feeling burdened with just too much work, just handling family and their own work if they are working outside. And cooking and cleaning and everything. So it was a mix of these two things that kind of didn't make even home the safe space that we kind of take for granted. And so the irony of stay home, stay safe, wasn't lost on us. And
Yeah.
that's when, on an impulse, I made this 7-minute film called Listen to Her. And in fact, I put it on YouTube and I said, no copyright, do what you want with it, use it to trigger conversations around it. And I was fortunate that, UNESCO and a bunch of organizations who I reached out to, so that they could use it in their workshops, and they continue doing this work. This is not my core work. So I knew it would come out, some people will watch it, it would touch some people. But finally, how do we sustain, and how do we use even a 7-minute film to talk more about these issues? Because finally, issues like, let's say, domestic violence is called a shadow pandemic. And it's not that it only happened now, it's been there before, but it suddenly was happening much more. And yet those stories were not coming out. Like, even on YouTube, the number of women who shared their story after seeing the film was at some level completely heartbreaking. And I got some, through some friends, I made a fairly exhaustive list of ground level helpline numbers across the country, in at least 17 states, in as many as one could gather. And I put them up on my social media and I said, please. And I get calls now, I get calls of from friends, from somebody's help, needs help, somebody from even our kind of, we think it's only it's a problem of the poor, of the underprivileged. But domestic violence in many forms that exist, physical and mental, is again across class. So I have these numbers handy. Someone calls me from Bengal, somebody calls me from Tamil Nadu, somebody calls me from Assam, so I can quickly sort of bring them out. So yeah, so it's been a strange
Yeah.
experience where it's many
No, I
different
think that
emotions
really
one
leads
has
me
felt.
one of the questions that I've had is, I mean, the pandemic has actually brought out a lot of the not just pain, but a lot of the systemic rot that we live in. For
Absolutely.
example, we tell people,
Absolutely.
wash your hands, every time you come home. Most people don't have taps, they don't have
Don't do it.
water. I mean, we've
Yeah, what are we even
enabled
talking
people to live
about?
in
Yeah.
squalor, we forced them and pushed them into it. So I'm just wondering whether, given the fact that all this rot has actually come out, is there a way that people from media can sort of come together to address it in some way? Shouldn't there be a forum where filmmakers, influencers, if there's such a word,
Right.
I think everyone should be an
Yeah, well,
influencer.
it is.
That's
Now there is social media influencer.
yeah.
There's a whole different
So
category, I
I'm just
believe.
saying, should we not be addressing the rot at least now? We're not doing that.
No, definitely. But
No?
why just media? Why just filmmakers? We as just people,
Hmm.
how can we live with ourselves and kind of go on with business as usual when we know that so many people have are living not in squalor or in difficult circumstances. I read a couple of days ago, maybe it was a week, 10 days ago, just before sleeping, I was just looking at the news because I don't have a television, so I'm thankfully not listening to any shrill voices screaming over each other. So I just read a couple of online magazines and newspapers.
Hmm.
So I just read this woman, she killed her 3-year-old child and then killed herself. And she had another 7-year-old child and a husband, but they just didn't have any money, and she felt there'd be less mouths to feed. I mean, what makes you do something like that? And the photograph had a photo of the father and the daughter, and they were just empty eyes and just looking, for this
Yeah.
photo op or whatever the journalist or whoever,
Yeah.
wrote it. I'm thinking, my God, even tragedy, the way they kind of take it for almost granted, in the sense, like, if
Yeah.
something even half of that would happen to our lives, we would be destroyed. And not to say they are not, but at
Yeah.
some level, so many people have just taken it as their fate, or I don't know what, that they don't, there's not even a rebellious, no one's rebelling. Like, imagine the number of workers who went back home, had they, and they were being sprayed with
Yeah.
pesticide. Can you imagine if we were, even one finger was being sprayed with pesticide, would be up in arms, right? So what is the bigger tragedy is that we have created a society where subjugation and oppression and all of this has been normalized. It's not that we didn't know. How can we pretend that we didn't know that this country
Yeah.
or these big cities, that people who work in our homes, people who are the street hawkers, people who build these buildings, like every city is standing literally on the shoulders of all these people who were sort of thrown out of the city in a way because they had nowhere
Yeah.
to go, while all our schools were empty, all our offices were empty, all our government places were, because offices, everything was closed,
Yeah.
and yet we could not give them shelter. All of us have at least enough to feed 5 people a day, 2 people a day, and we didn't.
Yeah.
And it was it and I think, I mean, of course, all of us, I'm sure many of us gave a lot. I kept thinking, oh,
Yeah.
I've stretched, I've already given to 10 organizations, I
Yeah.
can't do any more. And then the 11th one comes in and you say, oh, this is the least I can do, let me. And we all stretched ourselves. Is it
But
enough? No,
I
it's
think
not.
the question that we need to ask more is, when you say what goes around comes around. I mean, it is the privileged that is so scared and sitting at home, and we are behaving. This untouchability, has taken a
Yeah,
different form
well, we
right
have to be
now,
careful. I don't
and
think we
the
need to be
same
callous.
people
We
who
need to
we
be
never
careful.
bothered about. We never
Yes.
bothered about the ones who walked home, the ones who build our cities. We never bothered about them.
Yeah.
We are so scared that they will give us the disease. So everybody wear a
Yeah,
mask.
yeah.
Everybody be careful. My point is that when
Yeah.
you're so scared now, the privileged is so scared of contracting something, which by the way is not coming to us from the poor. By the way, it's actually
No.
coming
The
through
rich have
plane,
given it to the
and
poor, and
yeah,
maybe now they're
we're
scared
giving it to the
they're
poor
going to get it
actually.
back.
So I'm saying at least
Yeah.
now we should be able to highlight that, the
Oh,
realization
we
that if
definitely
you
need to. We
live in
definitely need
complacency, it's
to.
going to come back and strike you one day. And what
It
is
is
the
already, right? I mean, that way the virus itself is very agnostic. It is
yeah,
going to strike anybody, whoever invites it, because it's not sort of going and seeking people. You
yeah,
have to kind of, but it's at the same time, it's people are saying it's a leveler, but it's not a leveler,
not a leveler.
because I mean, there are rich people, there are affluent people who are also getting it, but maybe because they are being callous or whatever, if they really tried hard, they can still do. I mean, social distancing is not difficult, right?
Yeah,
All of us who haven't got it because we've just been at home. So it's not, the point is that this normalization of all of this, my worry is that when all of this finishes, because it's going to have a very long lasting impact. I mean, can you imagine if you
absolutely.
didn't earn that day you can't eat? Do we even know that emotion? We don't. We all have at least enough savings to get through the pandemic, right? But there are so many people who don't. What do they do? And it doesn't mean that we all go to the street. I mean, somebody can say, listen, I mean, if we are privileged, we are privileged. I didn't do anything for it, or that should I just throw it away? No. But can we at least stretch ourselves and do something for other people who are not as, privileged? And there are hundreds of things to do. There are, and not just money. You could volunteer your time, you could help in terms of whatever your skills are. If you're a marketing person, if you're in the social media, whatever,
Yeah,
there are lots of ways to actually help.
yeah.
But this, my worry is that, are we going to bounce back to exactly where we were? Are we going to really lead different lives after this? Are we going to be more compassionate? Are we going to take care of nature in a more mindful way? Or are we going to go back to the
And are
same
we going
noise
to
and air
realize that
pollution
when
and
you
everything?
let the rot grow, it's going to come to
Yeah,
your backyard sometime soon?
of
So,
course. I mean,
get
this in
involved
itself
in getting
has.
rid of the rot. Yeah. But
In
when you were
fact,
talking
what the
about
pandemic
about the
has.
glitch, things not changing, I think it was Paul Drum or somebody who said one of the biggest fallouts of the pandemic is that the wealth has moved upward. The wealthier have become wealthier, and the poorer
But
have
that
become
even
poorer.
before the pandemic, but I think that's has been there for a long
Yeah.
time, since since consumerism has grown, and since
Yeah.
this whole corporate culture, and all
Yeah.
of that is serving a certain class of people, no question about it. But
Yeah.
what the pandemic has also taught us, that our lives are deeply interlinked, intertwined. When we, in terms of climate change, when we say, oh, the glaciers are melting there, and we are seeing the repercussions, or there is a recession in one part of the world and you can feel it here because the rupee is then plumbing. Similarly, I think this has really shown us that our lives are deeply intertwined, because if I have to be safe, I also have to ensure that everyone around me is safe.
Yeah.
So even for selfish reasons, I think it is
Exactly.
time that we understand that if we are not going to be killing human beings, whether for the planet or the people, then we will not be happy, we will not be safe. So if for nothing else, and in terms of people who have greater area of influence, circles of influence, whether they're actors or influencers or whoever is in the public domain, yes, I think our responsibility increases because we can do more, there are more people listening. And how do we use that privilege, or how do we
Yeah.
use that opportunity to do something good? But at the same time, it's no one's place to tell the other, because finally it's your conscience and how comfortable you are in
But
in living with it and
one
what
thing
you
that we
think is
must do more
important.
than any other time. Sorry, we're still talking. The one thing that
Yeah,
we
yeah, no,
must do
no.
more than any other time is ask for accountability from the system, whether it's the government, whether it's whether it's the judiciary. I mean, where is the
I mean,
accountability in all of
the
this?
government, we all know what is happening, and where are the
All
priorities.
governments,
We are
state, center,
making
all governments,
whatever. I
regardless
mean,
of
yeah,
which
all
party you vote.
governments. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, but we need to ask, why is our health budget 1%? Like,
yeah,
shouldn't this, and it's not just the COVID. How many people die of tuberculosis in a year? Actually, it's as many as people are dying of COVID now,
yeah,
or how many people die of, how many children are malnutrition, or how many people die of diarrhea, or, so various diseases that have,
yeah,
and in fact, people with those diseases are suffering more because they don't know where to go, and they are scared to go to the hospital. There are no, the health workers are completely exhausted, working day and night. So it's actually a huge mess, and definitely the government needs to be accountable and needs to decide what are their priorities at this time. Is it statues and temples? And this is no offense to any religion, but the point is it's a personal. If you believe in God, can we be sort of, can we keep that more personal and not do something at this point of time where we need to take our everything that we have, all our resources, into keeping people healthy, keeping people safe, giving employment to people, making sure that people are not sort of taking their lives.
yeah,
There are many psychological repercussions as well of this.
yeah. That's true. But I think also, I think the question also is beyond. Is that the birthday boy
Sorry,
signaling something to
birthday
you?
boy. He's telling me it's 8:20. I think, yeah, time
Ah,
to
okay.
sleep. I see. That's why you won't have seen all of this in all the men that you interviewed.
True,
It's 8:20.
true. None of them were
I'll be
disturbed
there
by
at
their
9.
children. Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm happily
it's a
disturbed. So
very
let me,
maternal
all
thing.
of you audiences, please, we also play many different roles, and being a mom is one of them. You want to
Exactly.
come and say hi to my friend? No? Then go to sleep, Papa.
Okay.
9 o'clock, I'll be in bed. Yes, and
Yes.
Sharda is going to leave me at 9.
I promise you, Rehan. Yeah. I'll
Okay,
send off your mama at
okay.
9. So no, I was just saying that
Huh,
regardless of
sorry.
what resources are put into temples or anything else, I think we need to focus on how much are we spending on healthcare. What is the
Absolutely.
percentage
And
of the,
no, there has to be an
God's,
RTI. The whole thing of
yeah,
RTI is that we should be
yeah,
able to ask, where is our money, our taxpayers' money? What is it
education,
going in? Do
healthcare,
we have, yeah, education,
yeah,
healthcare, jobs? Where are those job opportunities? I mean, it's never been this bad.
yeah.
I don't know, in
But
50
also,
years,
I
or now
think,
it might be even more.
sorry, yeah,
It's the lowest that we have had, people who have been who are unemployed. So there are huge issues, and I hope the government, whether it's central or state or even smaller, our sarpanches, in whichever places where there is political power, I hope they will, because they have the wherewithal to actually implement, to scale things up,
yeah,
to be able to at policy level to do things. They have the infrastructure. There are a lot of NGOs that are actually stepping up and doing good work, and doing things that
a
sometimes you
lot,
feel that the government should be
yeah,
doing. And a
yeah,
lot of the organizations are doing some amazing work.
very true. NGOs have really stepped up, and some of the state governments have also stepped up. They really
Yeah, some
tried
of the
without
Kerala
any
especially, I
resources.
think,
Yeah, yeah,
and
they
I'm
have
sure
to
Tamil
step
Nadu
up
is also.
to the extent that they know how to and can. You know,
Right, right.
Nandita, I'm going to just make our audiences a little happy by taking a commercial
Okay.
break from the problems that we are faced with, which we have discussed,
Okay.
and I hope every viewer, at least of this, talk, takes back some of these thoughts. Right. But I think there's a lot of curiosity around your career and your career graph. And so I think one of the
Ask
things that
me.
many people do not know is that you started with theater and then you went from
Yes, but
theater to
not really
cinema.
to become an actor. I didn't start with theatre. It wasn't a stepping stone to films, or it wasn't because I wanted to be an actor. In
Yeah.
fact, it was, acting was neither a dream or an ambition or a desire, nothing. I
Mm.
did street theatre actually,
Really?
and that too only because my classmates sort of introduced me to Safdar Hashmi, who had a group called Jannatya Manch. And
Mm.
4 years I worked with the group, and we performed in sort of in factories, in universities, in slums, in bastis. And that I call it my first sort of political training apart from my acting training. And in fact, Sabdar used to always say you should join the National School of Drama, and I said, yeah, I enjoy acting, but I don't think that's what I want to do in life. And unfortunately, he was very brutally murdered while performing a play. But I often think that had he been there, he would have been happy to see that something that he wanted me to do, I actually ended up acting in a few films.
Yeah.
So yeah, in
That's
that sense, I did some bit of theater and also some
mm.
proscenium theater, but I wasn't really big into that. I used to learn Odissi actually. I did Odissi for about 12 years, and but
Really.
again, not to become a dancer or anything, but just to kind of, I have my father is a painter, mother a writer, so I did grow up with a lot of arts, learned a bit of music, and but again, not to become any of that. It was just more to have a more holistic sort of
Yeah.
life, and I'm very
So tell
grateful for the
me.
upbringing I had.
Okay. I'm sorry, I seem to interrupt you because of the time lag.
No, sorry, yeah, because
Something
there's
was
a
like,
lag. That's okay, don't
yeah,
worry about
yeah.
it.
No, I wanted to also, follow up on that and say, don't you think we need a lot more street theater, street theater that also develops a certain body of thought through street theater, like you had
Absolutely.
with some,
No, I used to think because yes, I was 17, 18. I probably did plays till
yeah,
about 21 or whatever. I used
yeah,
to actually think that, it's changing the world because you go and perform in the middle of people, and
mm,
it's not a dedicated audience. You just have to sort of drum it up and, kind of get people. Somebody's standing on their balcony, somebody's up on a tree.
mm,
If you're uninteresting, they will just walk off. And so you take up social issues, but do it in a fun way. You sing and you tell stories, and we did some amazing plays. And I remember those days as being sort of so full of energy and idealism and enthusiasm. It was just fantastic. And I remember I used to be so tired by the end of the day, but I still slept much better than I probably sleep now. I would go to college, then go to my Odissi dance, do music, then go for rehearsals for the play, and then come back at 10. And my father would say, boy, again, you're late. You're up out so late and all of that. But it was like really, we were productive. We were doing things. We were engaged. And street theater primarily is to take up these kind of issues.
yeah.
Now, when you see street theater competitions in colleges and all that, it's about anything and everything. It's just seen as a play, but actually it had a very sort of, as they call, agitprop, like agitation or propaganda. Usually street theater was used for that.
Yeah.
But in fact, after Safdar was killed, 12th April, which was his birthday, has been celebrated as a street theater day. And there are actually a lot of young people who have these groups. And I think every medium has its own strengths and, I mean, advantages and disadvantages. Whether
Mm,
it's street theater, whether it's proscenium play, whether it's films,
mm.
television, now of course OTT, all these online platforms. So
Yeah.
every medium has its own good and bad, and we need all of them. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be an either
Nothing
or.
replaces the other, really. But I think
Absolutely,
my,
they're
my,
different
my question
experiences.
was, should we
Hmm.
be making an effort to revive that kind of street theater which had a certain worldview, which was interactive, which was, really lung to lung. No matter how
Yeah,
much you do virtually, there's nothing like two people breathing in the same space. Nothing should replace that.
absolutely. And also, you make eye
So,
contact.
yeah,
Imagine you make eye contact with every audience. You
yeah,
feel like you're talking to them. The
yeah.
first play that I did was about, in fact, it was with another group called a women's group. And it was a dowry play. And I remember they had these orange ribbons we used to have. And I was the woman, the victim, who was in the middle of this fire and she's getting burnt. And after the play we would take a chadar, and everybody would sort of put in whatever few coins, and sometimes people would give like a rupee or whatever, 5 rupees, whatever was like a big amount at that time. And I would wonder why they are doing that, and they would be crying, they would be touching me saying, tum theek ho, tum theek ho. And I used to think, what's wrong with them? I mean, can't they see it's a play? I mean, these are ribbons, for heaven's sake. And you realize that what these dowry stories, which was like somewhere hidden in the newspaper, which was a story for us that happens to these other people, for them it was their life. It had actually happened to their daughter or somebody's sister, and so the way they reacted to it was completely different. Or if we would do a play about secularism, we would do a play about economic policy, we would do a play about women's issues. And it touches a very sort of raw nerve also, because you're right there, you're speaking to them, you have come to their space and sharing the story. So it's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
In terms of acting, there is no similarity with, in that sense, proscenium or film, because there everything has to be loud, your voice, your actions, because
Yeah.
you have to gesticulate so much more. Whereas in a film, if it's a close up, even the sort of a twitch of
I was
a
going to ask you that
lip,
question, when you made that
right?
transition from theater to film, because you came into film at a time when it had crossed, it was past the histrionics genre of
Right,
acting on celluloid.
right.
So you
Yeah,
came
that
in
was more
when
real.
performance was more realistic on the one hand. I also, when you said Fire, it's
Mm-hmm.
hard not to remember Fire, the film.
Of course,
When
for
you,
me
I
as
mean,
well.
I always wanted to ask you, when you chose to do that film, all odds were against you. I mean, you were a beautiful, young, actor. The
I
world was
hadn't
your
done
oyster.
really
You could
much.
have done anything you wanted. And then you did something which was at that time even considered criminal. Although most people miss the fact that the film was not about lesbianism or homosexuality per se, it was really about relationships, I think, the film.
Yes,
And
but between two women, and nothing like
yeah,
that had ever
how did you
happened
want
really
to
on
do that film?
screen,
How did
right?
you do it?
So like I said, I never wanted to be an actor, and through a friend, I was introduced to Deepa Mehta, the director, and I hadn't heard of her, or I didn't know anything about her at that time. She, of course, didn't know anything about me. So we just met and we hit it off, and she said, "Okay, here's the script. You read it and tell me what you think, and I'll do an audition." So I read the script and I really liked it, and I thought, wow, I come from a very liberal family. We talk about almost everything, but we don't talk about homosexuality. We've never really had a conversation about it. And this I'm talking, what, 96, so about 16 years ago, 26, no, how many years ago?
20 something.
26 years ago,
Yeah.
my God, yeah, 26 years ago. So imagine in India, people just didn't talk about all of that, although it was very inclusive upbringing that I had. So there were people with other sexual orientations who would come, but it was never part of the conversation as such. So when I told Deepa I really liked it, and we had a chat, and she said, "Okay, I don't want to audition you, and you are my Sita." And I was like, "Okay." And that time, Shavana Azmi hadn't been cast, or no other actor had been cast. So when they decided that she was going to do, sort of, we were going to do together, like opposite me, I said, "Don't you want to audition me now? Because she's someone I've grown up watching, and she's such an eminent actor." And she said, "No, I'm totally confident." And I was like, "Okay." So I literally plunged into something, not fully knowing where it was going. And I did know that we would have problems, but not to the extent that we had. And but the kind of reactions it got from people saying it's such a bold film, so ahead of his times, and sort of being really happy with it, to people saying, even on flights, saying that was a terrible, how could you do such a film, and are you going to make everybody lesbian, and sort of accusing me of all kinds of things, to
Yeah.
people being confused. But it was through those responses and having to answer many questions about it
Mm.
that my own journey also began, and my engagement with what we call the other
Mm.
also started, because I started realizing that what an insensitive society we live in. I was very young at that time. You're still in your own bubble, you're protected, you're at home, etc. And you slowly start realizing that what kind of hypocrisy, double standards we have. And so many people, from the LGBTQ community would come and share their stories with me. So it was also like I was overwhelmed by it almost felt like I had to take on this responsibility of kind of correcting the wrong. And it was completely by default that I started championing the cause. And of course, now over the years, I feel more and more strongly about it,
Yeah.
about any form of discrimination
Yeah.
on the basis of anything that you're born with, even more so, but
Yeah.
even as a choice. Like,
Yeah.
why do we discriminate? What gives rise to these prejudices? What are our unconscious biases? Why are we so judgmental about people loving, and we are totally fine with lynching and hating and trolling and all of that? We seem
Yeah.
to have normalized. So for me also, it was I think a good way to sort of begin, not just acting, but also bringing my social work experience and my intent, because I had done my master's in social work, I was with NGOs, and acting came much later. So in that sense, it allowed me to also bring these two passions
Yeah.
together with the kind of films I wanted to do. And I never
Yeah.
wanted to move to Bombay, so
Yeah.
I was quite clear. So I started doing more regional films, what we call regional, and they weren't watched outside their states. That time there was no OTT, it was pre-digital.
Yeah.
So if I did a Malayalam film, it was in Kerala, or a Tamil film was
Yeah.
in Chennai, Bengali film was there. But I did films in 10 different languages,
Yeah.
and those experiences was very, very precious. And I think that's also what has given me so much in terms of just knowing different parts of the country, being part of different stories, meeting different people, and
Yeah.
that's really enriched me.
One of the questions that I have is when going by your life, where your own life, literally, and the way it sort of played itself out in all the mediums that you chose to work in, whether it was social work or whether it was films or theater. Would you say that one of the things that actors don't do enough is to actually get out there and experience life? You know what I'm saying? I mean, there is a tendency
Yeah.
for actors to become successful and then go off into some kind of an ivory castle and then live out of there. Do you think there is a tendency to not continue to be in touch with the life outside? I
Well, I
sometimes
guess
think that's
so.
a
But if you
problem.
become big stars and
Yeah.
you
And then you lose
kind of,
touch with
that's
what's
the
really
enigma.
happening.
You see,
Yeah.
that's what, and you probably do, but it's like an occupational hazard at some level. I mean, what do? You can't. In fact, what keeps me grounded is this straddling of these two worlds.
Mm.
Although the film world thinks of me as this activist, I don't think they take me too seriously as a film person, and the activist world thinks of me as a film person. So when they want to do something where they have to launch something, or they know that she's accessible, we'll just call her and she'll probably do it. So I kind of don't belong to any one world fully.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, I guess, but that's everywhere in the world, right? That's true of anybody who becomes a celebrity. That whole
Yeah.
notion of celebrity itself is so superficial, because
Yeah.
sometimes a very great musician, let's say Pandit Bhimsen Joshi, how many, or Kumar Gandharva, how many likes and how many followers, or how many people have seen their things that are already on YouTube.
Yeah.
And you see somebody much more popular, maybe a TV star, and I don't mean to put anybody down, but for some serial that they've done, and they will have many more, and that is what is being gauged and counted. And a
Yeah.
lot of people tell me that if you had done the commercial films, you could have become a big star, and you could have sort of straddled both worlds. You could have done all the good work that you want with the kind of marketability that you have. But then
Mm.
I don't know if I would be the same person. I don't know if I would have wanted then to do all the other things that I do.
Mm.
So from the outside, it may seem very simplistic, but being an actor comes, or being a star rather, comes with a lot of baggage. The
Yeah.
amount of time you have to spend in your PR and look a certain way and constantly be visible, be on the social media. I have a very hesitant relationship with social media, so
Yeah.
I usually end up just sharing articles that I want, that I think is, if I've read something good, and I just share it, or some, like this webinar, or this conversation, and some of the things that I do in the public domain, I share those. But other than that, I don't share really anything beyond it. But you have to be at it,
Yeah.
so it's a whole different world, and
Which
each
is
one
not
to their
easy.
own.
It is not easy. And I think
It's not
also this
easy.
false binary between activism and being a star. I think that
Yeah, and
itself
all these
needs to be,
labels.
yeah, that needs to be. But also, I think there is some some murmur about, the whole hierarchy, which is sort of, a trend that was set by Bollywood, and then it's kind of gone to other film industries also, that the hierarchy could get dismantled, post pandemic, that equations are changing. There could be more non-stars getting opportunities, also with the OTT
Well, because of the
platforms.
OTT also,
Yeah,
exactly. So many
yeah,
amazing actors have
yeah,
come up and have, sort of
yeah,
really have been shining through so many. And people think, why should we then indulge these big stars? And they are so expensive. They come with a big entourage. Is it really
yeah.
worth it? So, I mean, it is going to change a few things. But I don't know, when television came, I'm sure that that time there were those questions. But mainstream cinema or big stars, I think, are here to stay. With that, I think many other things will also happen. And maybe
Although
people
I think
want
social
both.
media is the first interactive media, television wasn't.
Yeah, but social media, when you have all this technology with
Yeah,
otherwise a very traditional, patriarchal, sexist, feudal society, the combination is very lethal because you almost don't know. Suddenly, you feel like you have the power to make a difference. And make a difference, I don't mean in a good way, but you have a power to say something. I mean, the kind of trolling, I also get trolled terribly. I don't look at my notifications anymore, but I remember that when I started with Twitter in 2014, and I remember in 2016, it was, there were some lies that were being spread about me, and I was being trolled so badly for something I hadn't even said. So I wrote a rejoinder in the papers, and I wrote a whole article called "The Troll Story," and I sort of then typed saying I'm not going to. I tweeted saying I'm not going to do any more social media. And suddenly a lot of people said, no, 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 we follow you and we like what you share and please stay, etc. So largely good people are silent
yeah,
because we don't want to keep responding. I mean, I didn't even know all these people existed who also were supportive. Because when you support, we don't really say. But
yeah,
when we oppose, we scream and we shout and we become nasty. And to women, especially, people become so sexist
yeah,
and so crude. And
yeah.
you think, who are these people? Of course, there are some that are paid people and there are some probably who aren't. But
Mostly
even
paid.
if you are, can you be, yeah, but mostly paid. But how can you even
But it
earn? How
also
can you
kind
even
of
eat with
reflects
that
the kind
money?
of sickness that exists
It's
in
that's
society
quite
that has,
sad actually.
yeah,
That it
that's
how
what trolling
how
powerful
do you
is.
sleep at night? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
you are saying all kinds of hurling all these abuses at people you don't even know. You don't even know
yeah,
what. So,
that's true.
so it's
But
also brought out a strange side to people.
yeah,
So, but
that's
it's
true.
also democratized views and opinions and talent. So, like everything, it's a double-edged thing. It's finally
Yes
a
and no,
neutral medium.
Nandita,
What you
because when
do
you look
with
at
it.
a place like Twitter, Twitter commodifies
Mm,
hate. They actually
absolutely.
commercialize hate. And that's something that really
But
needs
you
to be
can
talked
also
about.
use it for good things. I mean, Arab
There is
Spring
no
also
also
happened
when it comes to
because,
something like this, when you're commodifying hate with such magnitude, then everything else is just a
well,
counter narrative.
it is actually a platform, and you can, whether it's Twitter or Insta or whatever, Insta requires much more visual, and you have
Yeah.
to be a little obsessed with
But
yourself or
hate
at
is
least with
now a
something
business model, you see.
to
Hate
be.
is a business
Hate is a
model.
business model, but that also shows what kind of a society we are. Like, and society is made up of us. When are we going to take responsibility and
Exactly.
say that we are part of this pandemic? In the
Yeah.
sense of this, where is so much hatred coming? Is it coming from our frustration? Is it coming from our inability to do something significant? Are we being made to feel so small that this is the only way we can show our power, by being horrible to other people? So,
Yeah.
who are these people? I'm curious to know what kind of families. Do they have children? How do their children respect them? What do their spouses or mothers and fathers? I mean, really, I would be curious to know, uh,
Yeah.
how do they
You know,
even
yeah,
live
but
day after day
one of
by
the
spreading this hatred?
right. But I think there needs to be an engagement with social media platforms by I don't know, there needs to be a civil society of social media that engages
But
with
the
these
thing is, we are
platforms to
not
say, what are you doing?
organized.
Yeah.
Like earlier, you had said, shouldn't the filmmakers, people come together? But we are not unified. I mean, now you're seeing
Mm.
the what is the opposite of unified? being played out in the ugliest ways possible of the
Yeah.
industry as well, through
Yeah.
this Sushant Singh's death. So I mean, no, which media, even media, is it unified? Who is really unified? Just by being in a profession, they are as heterogeneous as anywhere it is. So
Yeah.
we can only unify as people, I feel. All those who think similarly or are sort of in some way have similar concerns can be together. Even if we don't know each other, we are kind of connected if we are
Yeah.
doing something positive, because
Yeah.
of course we have to rebel against what is bad, we have to call it out, but we also have to constantly do things that are also positive, so that in the hope that the positive will outweigh the negative at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. The one of the places that you've been to, and you're an insider there, is because I always think the
Right.
international film festival platforms have somehow uh, hosted and given a platform to the kind of cinema that has not been able to penetrate the Indian markets. I'm talking
Right.
very India specific when I say this. So you've been a part of the Cannes Film Festival more than once. You were on the jury once, and then you were on the short
Twice,
film jury
twice in
another
the
time.
jury. Yeah.
Yeah, and then your own
Once
film
in the
went
main
there for
jury,
showcase.
once in the short
I
film.
think
Yeah.
Virat
And
or Manto was
Manto was
showcased.
also
Yeah,
premiered. Manto was
yeah.
premiered,
So
yeah.
you know what the outside world gets to see of Cannes is so cosmetic. It's the red
Yeah.
carpet and the
The
laurel.
glamour, the red
Yeah,
carpets, the fancy
which is
dresses,
really quite
etc.
surreal. I mean, this is one of the biggest film festivals the world has ever seen,
And that's
and
all people want to
people
ask and
forget
talk
that
about,
film actually
sadly.
happens in that festival because all they see is what happens outside. With all the
Right.
sponsored, catwalks or
Totally.
whatever it's called. Yeah. But what was your experience from within as a member of the
Well, when
jury?
I
And
was
when
in the jury, that was
yeah,
2005. And when I came back, and that's what they asked me, oh, you wore saris, and what was it like to, what did Salma Hayek wear? And it was more about what you wore, and was it a decision? Were there pressures in the choices that you made? Did the festival interfere? And I was like, not at all. Our own human biases
you've gone frozen.
so there were 9 of us.
You've
I was
frozen,
very
Nandita.
fortunate
Yeah.
to have an amazing jury. Uh, am I?
Yeah, now you're
Sorry.
okay.
Is it? Is it okay now? Okay, I don't know. So I had Javier Bardem, we had Salma Hayek, I had Toni Morrison, we had John Woo, Agnes Varda, a Serbian director, Emir Kusturica, and so amazing 9 people and the best part of all those experiences were just the deliberations after the film. It was not even watching the film, because it's not like just because it's Cannes you only get to see the best films. I've seen better films maybe somewhere else as well. But how do you analyze it? How do you, because film is about life, and all of us come with different experiences. So when we comment about a film, we are not just talking about a film, we are talking about ourselves, because we have processed it with our eyes and our experiences. So to be able to be privy to those 8 other views, and to be able to share mine, and to be able to discuss and disagree, and two very good minds can completely have opposite views, in itself is such an exciting experience. So for me, that was the most precious one. And not too many people were interested in knowing about it, but I did write at that time about my
Yeah.
experience. And see, that's the thing, those experiences will always be part of your life. Whether people get to know about it, don't know about it, doesn't matter. No one can take those experiences, and what is life after all? It is a series of experiences.
Yeah. So that's interesting because and what about the marketplace that can is that a place that can be
Yeah,
more?
well,
I'm
it is
just
the
trying to
biggest
look at how
market.
it can be more accessible to filmmakers who
Indians?
otherwise great filmmakers,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that
In
also
fact,
is a kind of a
informally,
network.
we are forming a little group. I mean, it's still in its nascent stage, but some filmmakers are coming together and understanding, because a lot of the times, good filmmakers
Freezing,
don't know how to
freezing,
reach to
freezing.
these festivals. How do you approach them, and what do you hear me though? Even if you
Yeah,
can't
that's
see
fine
me, I
now.
guess.
Yeah, you're You're gone, Nandita. Your voice too is frozen. Hello. Hello. What is this conspiracy that's freezing you out? While you're very beautiful as a statuette, can you come back and be mobile?
Why not?
Yeah, your image is frozen, but I can hear you. You want to talk? Do you want to log in again?
Hear me? No.
You okay? I can hear you though.
Is that better? No.
No, your image
Can
is
you hear
still
me?
frozen. Yeah. Yeah.
Image is still frozen.
You're back.
I'm back. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you're back. Okay.
You think?
You were saying.
Okay. Lost the train of thought.
About
But
filmmakers accessing festivals like the
yeah.
Cannes.
So a lot of young new filmmakers don't even know how to reach, let's say, a Cannes or a Berlin or a Venice or Toronto or whatever. So I think we need to have a forum or an organization. Earlier, NFDC used to do that. There was Film Bazaar. All of that has become so
Because now you
defunct,
really have
unfortunately.
coordinators and impresarios doing that. And
Absolutely.
it's disconcerting.
But everybody will not even know who to approach.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not in the right group, how do you even know? So maybe some good films are just sort of vanishing, but that's true of everything. I'm sure there are a lot of good scripts that there are no takers. The problem is we don't have enough good producers. We have a lot of talent and all of that, but producers would be passionate and do these films.
Yeah.
I mean, now, for instance, Chaitanya Tamhane, who made Caught, his film The Disciple is in Venice competition. And really hats off to the producer, Vivek Gombar, who has, trusted for Caught and now for The Disciple.
Nandita, you're frozen again. It's very disconcerting. You'll have to come back.
No, but I think it's because I have no idea. Wait, let me just change my network.
You have no idea how many people have been looking forward to seeing you. So you better come back. So folks, I'm just going to take a look at what questions may have come in the meanwhile that I can ask as soon as she's back. Okay, so Aditya Nataraja says, I don't know. I didn't know Nandita had become a mother. Now that she's a mother, how does she look back at her character in Kanathil Muttamittal? Would she do something differently? And if so, what? Let me ask her that question as soon as she's back. Yeah? She's going to log on again, folks. Just give us a minute. I'm going to bring her back.
Am I back?
And you're back.
And I'm back.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I have no idea.
Nandita,
I guess the Bombay rains, just blame it on that.
I have to. Nandita, I'm going to break the conversation for a second because I was looking at questions.
I think let's move to questions because it's also 10 to 9.
Aditya Nataraja wants to know, I didn't know Nandita had become a mother. Now that she's a mother, how did she look back at her character in Kanathil Muttamittal? Would she do something differently? And if so, how?
Well, it's been 10 years, so you haven't been following me for 10 years, which is totally fine as long as you were doing more interesting things, and there are always more interesting things to be done. But yes, but being a mother, I think, impacts you like, of course, many other experiences, but this is such a primal experience, and it's something that's so close to your life that you have no option but for it to be impacted by. So I think the one thing that it has impacted me in ways is that I have done, most of my films are films that my child can't watch. They're mostly for grown-ups. So I'm now really itching to do also something that would be nice that my child can watch. If I would do Kannathil Muttamittal differently, that was a Mani Ratnam film. The story was his direction. I think the character is wonderful, and you don't, at that time I wasn't a mother at all. You don't have to be something to be able to act out. And I have lots of friends who have chosen not to have children, and they're leading amazing lives. And so there is no judgment on, and like yourself, and there's no judgment on the fact that a woman has to have a child or has to be a mother. It's one aspect of your life. Some have chosen, some have not. So whenever I gush about my child and talk about motherhood, I always give a disclaimer that please remember that it's not that those who have chosen not to have children are any less complete.
Oh, you're frozen again. Ah, you're back. You're back. Please stay there.
Okay.
Okay, Nritya Pillai, who is a dancer and who comes from the original Isse Velalar community and was very engaged with the politics of caste. She says that please tell Nandita Das that we look up to her as somebody who also fought the whole fair and lovely culture through her film.
Yes. Still fighting.
She says that what will what can you do to help the non-conformist sort of the non-body shamed type of people to come on screen? The fair and lovely, slim and tall has been the formula so far. So she says, what can Nandita Das do to take this forward, to get more unconventional dusky beauties, maybe even not as beautiful as yourself, Nandita, but dusky beauties of different kinds to come on screen? How can you help make that happen?
Yeah, so
How can anyone help make that happen?
It's a long way because beauty has been so standardized. The definition of beauty has become tall, thin, and fair. And anything that's outside it, you either, if a woman is confident and if she's busy sort of furthering her interests and talent, and you don't have the time to think about all this and you're totally fine. But those who are not, those who are bogged down by the pressures of looking a certain way, it is a tough thing. So I in fact always tell young women also that once you start actually furthering your interest and your passions and your skills and your talents, you will not even think about it. This will just be one of the 11th, it'll be the 11th thing, and you'll not even find time to do the first 10 things. So if you see in my films, whether it was Firak or Manto, wherever women have been, I mean, in Manto, some of the characters had to look like the original characters because it's a biopic and it had to be historically correct. But even in Firak, whether it was Amrita Sibhash or whether it was Shahana, whether it was Deepti Nabal or whoever the actors were, I always looked for people. The fact that I have done 40 films in 10 different languages is also because I've not lightened my skin, and by default I've become the face of the campaign Dark is Beautiful. Or later in 2019 we kind of also revamped it a bit and called it India's Got Color, which is just celebrating the diversity of skin tones. And in fact, if you see the bigger stars and all of that, there is actually no real dark person. What they call dark is also in a country where there are various shades of brown. The range is actually very narrow, from sort of duskyish, wheatish to very fair. That's the range. And there are a whole 20 other shades of darkness that are not even of dark skin tones, are not even represented in the film. And if at all somebody is dark, then there is a big deal about it. Either she has to be very nice and ultra sort of overcompensating for her skin color, or she has to be a vamp or somebody really terrible so you can take on the villain's character. So these stereotypes, it's going to take time, but I think every step counts, every drop counts. And all of you, I mean, each person has an area of influence. Never feel so disempowered that, oh, so and so can do it. And if I feel like, oh my god, look what Priyanka Chopra could have done, or a Dipti or a Deepika Padukone could have done, like, who am I? We are all in the hierarchy of things. It doesn't matter. Whatever is my area of influence, I'm going to do the best that I can. And similarly for you.
And that's true, especially for the women. I know that for sure in Tamil cinema, because there are dark, dusky men who have made it big. But the women still have to have that fair and lovely
absolutely
North
That's why
Indian.
so many North Indian actresses are acting in Tamil cinema,
Yeah. But
because the
Nandita,
man
to
can be
extend that a
dark,
little
fat,
further,
bald, whatever.
to
but the woman
enlarge
has
this
to be.
discourse a little, this Black Lives Matter has become a kind of an international symbol of sorts
Mm,
for different types of discourses of,
absolutely. I mean,
discrimination.
we should be saying caste lives matter, whatever,
Exactly,
like people of
exactly.
Dalit lives
So I'm just
matter, or
thinking, how do you think it can play out? I mean, let's also talk about cinema because it's not enough.
yeah, but in our
Uh,
country, when there's so little representation, right? What are we
yeah.
talking about? I mean, in fact, the caste politics is something that deeply, deeply bothers me. I don't know
And now
enough
religion
about
is
it.
very much back on the table.
And
So it's
religion has been
caste,
on the table for a while
religion,
now.
color.
Yeah,
Yeah,
religion definitely has been there for a while
yeah,
now, and this kind of majoritarian politics is really changing the very ethos of this country, which intrinsically is pluralist in so many ways.
yeah,
But the caste politics is not even talked about. What is bothering is that religion at least is being talked about, good, bad, ugly, at least it's on the table. Caste
yeah,
politics is just nowhere there. And in films, I mean, Pa Ranjit or Nagaraj Manjule or Neeraj Ghaiwan, there are few people who are coming in and changing the stories and
yeah,
telling their stories from within. But otherwise, even the few films that have been made, they have largely been made by people of higher castes or whatever it's
yeah,
called.
yeah,
But the thing is, I still don't think that's also bad. I mean, just because I don't have to be in Manto's era to be able to make Manto's film,
yeah,
or I believe that we can also tell each other stories if we have that level of empathy and genuine understanding. Of
yeah,
course you need research. I mean, I did 6 years of research for Manto. It's not like I just walked in and read his
yeah,
stories and started shooting. So similarly you have to do it, but we have to be more inclusive
yeah,
and get people to sort of tell these stories. And
yeah,
I really think that if we can talk about Black Lives Matter and not talk about Dalit Lives Matter or Tribal Lives Matter or anybody who's marginalized, and
yeah,
unfortunately there are so many people marginalized that I wonder how the actual population of those in the middle are probably a minuscule number
yeah.
as compared to everyone
We
who's
should be
out
saying
there.
all marginalized lives matter or something like that.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah,
tough when you kind of make it too large. So maybe it's time
yeah,
to definitely say Dalit lives matter, because we have
yeah.
completely sort of normalized this discrimination that exists everywhere in the country.
Okay, here's another question for you from Sudha Ratnam. Does art for art's sake have any relevance anymore, given the social and political challenges we face? Or must all art be political? Good
I
question.
think all art is political. Very good question.
Mm,
It doesn't need to be. I think all art is political. If you
yeah,
choose not to use your art, for if art is for art's sake, that's also that's your political stand, in the sense you're choosing not to do that. There's nothing really called apolitical, because you're making a choice. You're making a conscious choice of not engaging. I mean, I'm an artist's daughter. He doesn't necessarily make narrative. He's a figurative painter,
mm,
and he makes painting. I mean, during the lockdown, he's made tons of ink paintings, which are really about the migrant workers. So from time to time, he has made, but largely he just makes human figures, which are timeless and spaceless, and just going through different emotional and psychological and physical upheavals or whatever, ups and downs. So you don't have to, but it's still political. The fact that you are engaging with human beings and their predicaments is political. Or any film. Yes,
yeah,
you can say the mainstream hardcore commercial cinema. How
yeah,
is that political? It's not overtly political, but if that's the choice they're making after everything that we are going through, everything that is happening around us, to
mm,
spend crores and crores of rupees, and also political doesn't mean it has to be boring or preachy and messagey. We have created these binaries. Either it has to be entertainment, or it has to be this art
yeah,
house or independent. So that's why I don't like the word entertainment. I prefer the word engaging.
yeah,
We want to make engaging cinema, which kind of touches our head and heart without us almost knowing.
yeah,
So in that sense, yeah, this question comes up with me a lot, because for me, art has been a means to an end. I do feel that it facilitates a certain kind of social change that comes about through personal change, because in
yeah,
films you tell stories, and
yeah,
if it moves you and if it stays with you, it's going to impact your responses
Right.
And we all are part of that larger society. But I'm not going around telling people, why are you making those films that seem very frothy and maybe meaningless?
Yeah.
But people keep asking me, why do you make films? Why do you see art as a means of social change or
Mm.
as a means to an end? So each one, it's finally, I'm also a big champion of freedom and freedom of expression. So beyond a point, I feel like each one has to find that voice and not do it just because it's the right, it's like cool thing to
Yeah.
do. But if it comes from within, do it. If you want to be art for art's sake, that's fine too.
Beautifully said, Nandita. Really. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Okay, so Nalini Vipin has a very sweet question. She says, Nandita Das, I'm a hardcore fan of yours. You're a woman extraordinaire. I would love to
Oh,
know
thank
who
you.
or what is your biggest inspiration,
Oh, life.
right?
Just
Yeah.
meeting so many different people, going through so many different experiences, constantly being reminded that there are so many people out there who have such strong convictions and courage to do things with, they're up against so many odds, and given a chance, they would do it all over again.
Yeah.
So I think it's really those people. There's no one person, there's no one big. Sometimes people think I'm going to name some big actor or a big director. Of course, I admire a lot of people's work, no doubt. But the film work, even though it's in the public domain and people see me as an actor director, that's a very small part of my life. That's not what I spend, let's say, at least 80% of my time. Of course, when I'm doing a film, it's probably taken 110%. But largely, if I would say, over the last 30 years, I would say it occupies 20% of my time.
Yeah.
So I think it's just meeting different people. And while we earlier talked about all these people who troll and the hate mongers, but there are also so many wonderful people out there away from the media light. And I'm sure you all know so many
Yeah.
people who are just selflessly doing something for others without sort of feeling very magnanimous about themselves or without labeling themselves as activist or whatever. There are people in our families, there are friends, there are just people who just keep paying forward and who just are just large hearted and just deeply compassionate and courageous. I think I also get very inspired by courage that comes out of deep convictions.
Mm.
That I think is extremely inspirational,
Yeah.
especially in times such as these that we live in, where convictions itself are dropping so much. We're all becoming, a bit selfish and navel gazing. So it's always very inspiring when you see people who have strong convictions and courage that to follow them through.
There's your answer, Nalini. Life, courage. Two buzzwords for you. So, you went and spent some time in my school, Rishi Valley. You
Yes.
did.
Oh, you
What
studied
was
there,
that
is
like?
it? I forgot. Yeah.
It's my alma mater.
Oh,
You
those
spent a
four
whole
months
year
is
there, didn't
probably my best. I spent a term there, 4 months.
Okay.
My brother studied there
Okay.
from the fifth grade till the 12th. And I was very envious of him studying there. But, we have a 6 year age gap. So I was already in my 12th when he was going in fifth. So I couldn't study there. But I taught there. I took a year off after my graduation. I did my graduation in geography because I had a lovely teacher in school and I loved the subject. And after those 3 years of graduation, I didn't want to do it anymore. And I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to study anymore. I was like, okay, education is all rubbish anyway. And so my mother said, come on, you have to at least do a master's, because she'd done PhD and all of that. And she's the more disciplining part of my life. So I said, let me take a year off. And I went to Rishi Valley. I wrote to them and taught the fifth grade almost everything except maths, because I was terrible at maths and I didn't want to risk it. And those 4 months were my best months, I think, ever. If I had to really sort of think of a chunk of time, I used to be in their art shed all afternoon. We would go up the hill for walks, and the Asthachal was my favorite time,
Yeah.
where you just sit
Yeah.
on the rocks and just watch the sunset. So, and yeah, I was like a house mother in Palm House. I don't know if it was there, Sharda, at your time. But yeah, again, that experience, it wasn't to become a teacher, but again, that experience of being in this beautiful school with J. Krishnamurti's philosophy and being around these amazingly committed educationists, these
Mm.
children, away from the city in the middle of nowhere, was absolutely blissful.
You know, Nandita, I'm jumping from one thing to another, but from
Thanks.
that very insulated, not insulated, but very pristine almost environment,
Mm.
you went so international in a manner of speaking. You also won the Chevalier Award, the highest
Yeah.
French civilian award, which went to Shivaji Ganeshan and Kamala Hassan and several others in India. What does that honor feel like? You have this special French connection,
I
Can
know it seems
and
like,
yeah,
well, I think awards, I mean, in the moment you feel happy, but I'm not trying to sort of try and be modest or any of that. But
mm,
genuinely, having been on a couple of juries, at least 4 or 5 juries, and fairly prestigious juries, you realize that it's so subjective, right? I mean, it's that right time,
mm,
right place, somebody there and the jury thinks you're right for it,
mm,
something that you may have done touches someone. It doesn't mean you are the best at all. It just means that I've won a couple of other awards that I'm almost embarrassed about because I don't think I deserve it at all. But when you get it, you like say, okay, thank you, and
yeah,
all of that. But I don't carry it too strongly because I know how these things happen, and this is no disrespect. Every time I've taken an award, I've
your
tried
audio
to
and
say
video
to
is gone, Nandita.
otherwise not like what
Mommy's
older.
Mumbai network is playing truant.
My video is again gone. Hello, hello. Can you hear me? That's better now. You see,
Can't hear you very well.
is it your network or
Your voice is
mine?
breaking.
Why am
Hello,
I interrupting? It could be
are you
mine.
there? Do you want to log in again just for 5 minutes? We would anyway have to wind up in about 5 to 10 minutes. Would you like to log in again? Folks,
Okay,
I
see
think
you.
she'll be back. Ah, there she is. Yeah.
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 Okay. No, I think there's a lag also.
Yeah. I think
So,
the network is playing truant with you right now. So,
I know. Also, it's
I think,
time.
yeah, I think it's time. And I just want to say, Nandita, there's so much to talk about with you, so much to share with
Thank
people in
you.
terms of thoughts. We'll have to do 10 more sessions, make all of that happen.
No,
But
also because I haven't ever really had one profession. If the last thing that I'd like to share or say is that specialization is really overrated. Like a lot of young people ask, what do you want to be? What are you doing? When people ask me, if, like, what do you do if I'm in a foreign country where they don't know me or they don't know what I'm doing, I always find it difficult that how do you define yourself when you have interests that are very varied and that you do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I don't
yeah,
qualify to be a full-time actor, I'm not qualified to be a full-time director, I'm not qualified to be a full-time activist, I don't do any of it fully in
yeah,
that sense, and yet all of it is part of me and they feed on each other.
yeah,
So I think it's okay to be doing various things and not really having a profession other than when they have to write down and they can't write too many things. Then that's the only time you need a couple of words that just keeps them happy. But otherwise, I think it's okay to be sort of exploring and
yeah.
being a journey person, where your journey is the destination. So you don't have to be bogged down by
Yes,
who you are and what are
yeah.
you sort of labeled as.
So I
So
just want
thank
to
you,
close the
Shada.
session, folks. I have to close because she has to go. Her son is calling her. But I just want to close this by
He's
saying,
sleeping
Nandita,
now,
that you
hopefully.
are a living example
Oh, he is.
of how at the core of your soul, if you have an evolved and well considered, well experienced worldview, then it can apply itself to any medium, whether it's activism, whether it's cinema, whether it's brand ambassadorship, or just plain ambassadorship of causes. It can play itself out anywhere. But the more important thing is to live life, learn from life,
Fully.
and
And
yes,
experience. Throw
and
yourselves
experience.
in different experiences
Yeah,
without asking the question that what is it going to do for you. If you
absolutely.
just do meaningful experiences, different ones, things, one door will open the other, and you don't know where you'll reach and
Yeah,
what for. Where do you want to reach anyway?
yeah.
But just, I think having different experiences definitely enriches your life, your worldview. Yeah, how you look at
And your
others, how you
value
look at your
system.
own self. Yeah.
And your value
And by
system.
the way, my cat is also
Oh,
listening to
wow.
you. Can you?
That's quite the curio. What a
Hannah, she's
diva.
listening to all these.
What a diva. Anyway,
Thank you, Sharda, and thank you
thank you,
everyone who's
Nandita.
been
Lovely to see you
watching,
after ages,
listening.
and I hope we meet again and many more.
Likewise, definitely.
Okay, then.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Okay, viewers. Thank you very much for being here. I loved that conversation with Nandita. I hope all of you take away everything that she had to say to you in terms of life, in terms of values, in terms of just being humanitarian and having fun too and doing creative things. So, see you again with another chat soon. Bye bye for now.